I've been known to talk about fads on this channel from time to time, and every time I do, the topic of Cabbage Patch dolls seems to come up in the comments. Looking at them from the outside, most of these fads can be hard to understand. The people who are involved in them may look back and laugh at themselves a little, but they can usually still understand what made it so appealing in the first place. For the people who are never involved in the fad, the whole thing just seems insane. And that's what I'm experiencing right now. This is the thing I'm talking about. It's a fairly typical doll. It doesn't talk or move on its own or anything like that. To me, it's creepy looking, with those wide, lifeless eyes just staring into the distance. They're called Cabbage Patch Kids because they're said to be grown in a cabbage patch, like their heads come out from the leaves of a cabbage. Just an entire field of babies' heads sticking out of the ground. Oh no, I don't want any part of it. The deeper we look, the scarier it gets. Yet, it was one of the biggest fads of the 1980s. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I wish I could express the popularity of these dolls at the time, but it's hard to convey like this. People were lining up outside of stores and actually fighting each other to get them. One woman even broke her leg in one of these scenes. All of those stories you expect to hear when talking about a major fad are perfectly applicable here. And I apologize if I'm angering any fans of these dolls by calling them creepy, but you must understand where I'm coming from. And plus, you have to realize, they weren't exactly meant for me. I wouldn't say I'm in their target demographic. They're mostly meant to be sold to female children in the 1980s, whereas I'm a 27-year-old male in whatever decade you call this. So forgive me for being a little confused here, and I'm sure I'm not alone on this one either. So now I'm on a mission to figure it out. What made this little doll so appealing? In this news report from 1983, they actually asked some of the people among the crowd of buyers a similar question, and I have to say, their answers weren't much different from anything I've said so far.
As far as I'm concerned, they're the worst looking things I've ever seen. I mean, they are pathetic looking.
Okay, well, let's see what a woman has to say about it.
I don't know what exactly the attachment is. I think they're cute, but kind of funny looking.
And then I just wanted to include this answer because I thought it was funny.
I don't like them. I don't like them. I don't like their faces, but I want one.
Well, they finally asked a little girl, who I would expect to be much more helpful than any of those adults.
I like them.
Okay, we're getting nowhere here. It looks like there may not be a quick answer to this. So, it looks like we're going to have to start from the beginning, and luckily, every part of this fad is fascinating, so I don't mind going back a bit. There's some controversy surrounding how these dolls actually started. The man that gets all the credit for creating them is Xavier Roberts. His signature is found written on the adoption papers, on the dolls themselves, and when I ask Google who created Cabbage Patch dolls, he's the name that comes up. When I go to the Cabbage Patch website, they credit him for creating it. Hard to argue with all of that. But there is a woman named Martha Nelson Thomas that may deserve the credit instead. There's a video put out by Vice on this topic that tells the story in detail, but basically, Martha was creating dolls very similar to Cabbage Patch dolls before Xavier was making them. And besides the similar appearance of the dolls, there's another reason why many people think Xavier copied Martha. Do you remember just about a minute ago when I said Xavier's signature can be found written on the adoption papers? Did that sentence seem a little strange to you? Probably, because I haven't encountered too many dolls in my life, but I think they typically don't come with adoption papers, which is something that Cabbage Patch dolls are known for. When Martha made her dolls, she provided the new owners with adoption papers to make it seem more like an actual child. Well, Xavier did the exact same thing. I'd say that's a unique concept, so when you combine that with the fact that the dolls look so similar, it starts to look like Martha has a case. And she did file a lawsuit in the 1980s. The question became whether she influenced his design, or did he simply just copy it? The case lasted a few years and ultimately led to an undisclosed settlement, meaning there was no winner. He just agreed to pay her some money to drop the whole thing, but no one will tell us how much. And I think this whole adoption paper discussion leads us to our answer of why they were so appealing. It wasn't the doll itself, as much as what they made it represent. Buying a Cabbage Patch doll was the closest thing to adopting a baby that a young girl could possibly experience. They came with what looked like official documentation for you to fill out, they sold accessories so you can care for it, and just like real babies, each one was unique. They all looked a little different, had different clothes, even had their own name. In the eyes of many little girls, this wasn't just another doll. It was the equivalent of adopting a baby.
Melissa Lane, sign here, please.
She still has trouble spelling her last name.
To put it in business terms, it was the marketing more than the product. I've been skipping around in the timeline a little bit, so let me straighten everything out. When Martha was making these things, it was in the early 1970s, and she was making them by hand one at a time. They weren't popular at all, and she was hardly making any money. When Xavier started making them, it was in 1976, and he was also making them by hand and wasn't making too much money either. Nobody watching this knew anything about Cabbage Patch Kids until 1982. For one, they only experienced limited popularity, and for two, they weren't even called that yet. They were called Little People. In 1982 is when everything started to happen. That's when Xavier made a licensing agreement with a company called Coleco that allowed them to produce the doll. They changed the name to the one we know and started mass producing them.
Each sold separately from Coleco.
By the 1983 holiday season, they were one of the biggest fads in the country. Coleco is an interesting company in itself. I'd like to make a full video on them one day, but in short, they started off in the 1930s by making leather, later switched to swimming pools, and by 1983 were having some trouble. They entered the business of video games with ColecoVision the year before, which was now starting to fizzle out. They had just spent way too much money developing a home computer called Atom that just didn't turn out well.
Ah, she's a beaut. You can't beat a Coleco. How many can I put you down for? A lot? Please say a lot.
And they were in desperate need for something like this that could save them. The Cabbage Patch Kids were like a life preserver that they grabbed onto as tight as they could. It quickly became 75% of their entire business. Now, I can give you an important business tip right here. It's not the brightest idea to rely on a fad for 75% of your business. And I'm sure they knew that too, but they didn't want to let go of that life preserver. It was all they had. You can probably see where this is going. The sales for the dolls eventually died down, and in 1988, Coleco went bankrupt. 1 year later, they were bought by Hasbro. Now, it would be way oversimplifying things to say that this doll was responsible for all of this. That's why Coleco needs its own video, but for now, we can say it was a big contributor. It's hard to put exact dates on fads like this, but I'll say that crazy 1983 holiday season was the start of it, and I'll call the Coleco bankruptcy in 1988 the unofficial end, giving it a 5 to 6 year run, but it's not like it completely died after 1988. I just wouldn't qualify it as being a fad anymore. It does still exist today, and it's gone through quite a journey. Hasbro had it for a few years, then in the 90s it went over to Mattel. Toys R Us owned it at one point. Today it's made by Wicked Cool Toys. And I want to talk about one other thing that might help express their popularity in the 1980s. We talked about the Cabbage Patch Kids, and now I want to mention the Garbage Pail Kids. These were trading cards put out by Topps that parodied the Cabbage Patch Kids. They must have been playing off the fact that the original dolls look so scary. If you thought that all these dolls so far have been unpleasant, wait till you see Virus Iris or Drippy Dan. The funniest one I've encountered is Comb Over Grover. He's going bald, so he combs his nose hairs up to his head in an attempt to cover it up. But my point is, even these were popular. In 1987, there was even a feature-length movie centered around them. I haven't seen it myself, but I have seen I Hate Everything's video about it, and, well, he hates it, and it's just generally considered to be terrible. But come on, the Cabbage Patch Kids were so popular that even a parody of them became popular enough to justify making a movie about it. That's a whole new level of popularity. There was later a lawsuit between the Cabbage Patch Kids and the Garbage Pail Kids parties involving more copyright issues. The Garbage Pail people said it was a parody and therefore not violating any laws. The Cabbage Patch people said they were just using their brand to make money. The judge sided with the Cabbage Patch people and ordered that the Garbage Pail Kids be drawn in a different way. But the design changes combined with the decreasing popularity of the original Cabbage Patch Kids led to the Garbage Pail brand to fail right around the same time. But then it came back in 2003, and just like in the 1980s, we have both the original and the parody if you want them. It's just that not as many people want them. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the Cabbage Patch Kids. I'm guessing most of the people watching this aren't running out to buy one of these, but I'm hoping you at least understand the appeal a little bit better. It wasn't necessarily that a bunch of people wanted this hideous looking baby. It was the marketing that surrounded it. But since that's the case, I wonder, what if it had been a cuter looking baby? Would that have made this fad twice as big? Or was there something about this appearance that was appealing to the buyers? Or maybe just made it all work somehow? And finally, who do you consider the true creator of the Cabbage Patch doll? I'd like to hear what you have to say. And quickly, I thought you'd appreciate one more look at Comb Over Grover. Come on now, a baby wearing a tie with a comb over stemming from his nose. You can't tell me you've seen that before. And then he has that little comb in his pocket, and he looks so proud too, like he's fooled everyone. Thank you for watching.